Welcome all. Welcome back to the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. Thank you all for joining me once again with another amazing guest, as always. Apologies in advance if my voice sounds a little rough. I've had a 18 hour shift yesterday working at the carnival in the southern provinces. So, party, beer, and people who do not want to listen. It's great for your voice, let's say. But with me, I have Miss Isabella Young. And before I give her the word to introduce herself, I think a bit of a warning in advance is in order, because we will be talking about some heavy stuff, about some. It's not for the faint of heart, let's say. So consider this your warning. Although I would, of course, appreciate it if you just keep it playing and do listen, because these stories are important. They are as important to share as they are important to hear. So, Isabella, thank you for joining me. Thank you for coming on the show. And for those who may not be familiar with you or your work just yet, introduce yourself. What do you do? What's your
Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to be a guest on your podcast. I'm looking forward to our conversation. That's a good place to start. Where are my secrets? I follow astrology. I have a lot of planets in Scorpio, so secrets are I love secrets. I grew up in Australia and ended up meeting and marrying an American citizen. It was a whole lot more than that too, but I ended up, because of that, I moved to America. I thought I had actually met my guru when I was moving into an ashram, but spoiler alert, that's not what happened at all. I actually ended up in a cult, and I stayed in that cult for 8 years. It was hell, and I only escaped after a personal tragedy that broke me out of that cult programming, and I moved to Hawaii, and that's really when I was able to make sense of what had happened to me and start the healing process, which is still underway. It takes a lot of time to unwrap the reasons behind what led me into that situation. Yes, I'm still learning and growing, but excuse me, now I'm at a point where I can share what I've learned from my experiences.
Yeah, the healing journey will always be a tough one. I mean, I'm sure there are so many people who who never stop healing, or who have been through so much, and there are people who don't want healing. I know a few people who don't think they need to be healed, because I mean, a lot of their pain is also their identity, unfortunately. So yeah, the healing journey is always a tough one.
Well,
Sorry,
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say that no one gets out of childhood without wounds. And then
True.
those wounds, unless they're healed, shape and flavor and color everything in our lives, all our decisions, all our relationships. So unless we clean up the past, we drag it with us all through life, and that detracts from our experiences. And there's no way around the healing. What one has to experience, the pain, the grief, the sadness, and that actually means crying and screaming and raging and all that sort of thing. There's no way around that. And the thing is that while that's scary to go into, it passes. Once those emotions are experienced, then they're out, they're gone. Energy and motion is what emotions are. So we just move them through, and then we're not carrying them anymore. But for a lot of people, that's really scary. People don't even want to cry. They'll apologize for tears and things like that. But that's one of the most powerful healing modalities that we have available to us. A good old
It
cry.
is. Yeah, it is. I know my wife is she's going through her own healing process. She has said many times that thankfully through our relationship, she's now able to feel safe enough to really start the healing process. And
That's beautiful.
she's definitely healed some things in me as well, or make me see that I needed healing. So thought we're whole, turned out we were broken. Now we're fixing each other
Right.
and ourselves, of course.
Yeah, that's one of the highest purposes of a relationship, really, is to provide that safety for the other person to go through the healing, free of judgment and criticism and all that. I've been in relationships with narcissists, especially like these spiritual narcissists, where it all becomes about like who's the most wounded and who needs to cry the most and all that. And there's a competition around it, and it's really very unhealthy. So I'm free of that now. It's just I'm in a safe place where I can continue to just feel and process and be me.
Yeah, spiritual narcissists. I never understood that. Someone I follow on Instagram and who I've also had on the show recently. She Astral. She's great from the Astral Hour podcast. She posted something about that in regards to killing the ego, and that is really not a thing. And that's something that I do. I always have to make a bit of a joke of things, keep it lighthearted. So one of my comments was, "I killed my ego, so now I'm better than you," which is just that's the spiritual narcissism summed up. Basically, I am enlightened, so therefore I am now superior to you, which is not how I believe enlightenment works or should work. But
Right.
I mean, you know,
Yeah, the internet is rife with spiritual narcissists, just narcissists in general, like black magicians and all that. So it can be a very dark place if you don't have an awareness to be able to discern who's who's bullshitting and who's speaking truth. It's getting more and more difficult with this whole AI thing, and it's a real test for us to navigate through that, stay the path of truth, and not be distracted and diverted. And it's getting to be a very thin, like wire. I feel like that I'm walking on.
yeah, AI is I've done a few shows, a couple of podcasts, and just a follow-up live stream on AI, and it seems to be a thing that is either going to help us or going to destroy us, and I don't think there's really an in between.
Yeah, I wrote a chapter on it in my book, and I'm becoming more and more disturbed about it. The book's been published about a year now, but I'm finding out even more in results of studies that there's like AI psychosis, and
Yeah,
there's these conditions now that are arising, and it's only been introduced into well, for humanity in a relatively short amount of time, and to think what a short amount of time it's taken to get us to this point where even for those of us who have grown up without black screens, and we are connected to nature and the natural world, and now we come into this like black screen world and have to navigate through that. But what about the two generations? Well, you're younger than me, obviously, but now there are two generations of humans who are raised on the black screen technologies, so they relate first to screens rather than through the natural world. How does that set us up for a future? That's a really good question. I think people need to be asking, like, how is this AI setting us up for the future of our species? And more people are becoming what I'm calling techno humans, where they relate to life first through the black screens. There's so many people are now will do that. Most people. It's highly addictive. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it's pretty dangerous. Almost like I look at it like smoking. But started off, people thought it was cool, and then doctors were smoking and all that, and now it turns out it's killing people. So I think that
yeah,
this AI may not kill people, though it does encourage some people to kill themselves. That's happened. It's dangerous. It's iconic, it's far more insidious than people. It really needs to be like alarm bells. This stuff's dangerous, people. See it, how it's undermining people's creativity. Because while you can create fun stuff on the screen, but that's not really how we evolve as like spiritual beings. We're not evolving through our relationship with the screens. We evolve through our relationship with our God, higher self, and a relationship to our physicality and a relationship to the natural world. So AI and black screens technologies have taken all that off the table now. So people are disconnected from high power, God, universe, source. People are disconnected from their bodies, from their hearts, their souls, and from nature. And that's extremely dangerous because that's the most disempowering, dehumanizing state for a human being.
yeah. And even legitimate AI cults are now popping up, either devolving around AI or like mainly done through some sort of built AI. I've seen a video on that recently where the like, what is it, like prayer, like ask God kind of thing was nothing more than ask this AI that we have built and integrated into our Discord channel, of course, Discord, and it will give you all the answers because, it's AI, and AI is somehow omnipotent and all knowing, all seeing, when
It's
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 not.
I'm shocked to that some of the people who I've like been, not that I'm following them, I don't like to call that, but I've been like listening to what they've been saying for years now, people who, it's called like in the truth movement or whatever, and now they're consulting AI like it's God. Like what AI said about something. It's so dangerous and insidious and ridiculous to be, for me, I think, to be relating to this artificial technology. But and to be thinking it's sort of benign. But of course, it's been given to us, just like all the technologies. It's been given to us to enslave us, to keep us ignorant, to keep us disconnected from all that makes us powerful. This is what I've come to understand anyway. These tools, the televisions, the computers, the cell phones, and AI, they're all tools of these human slavers that are controlling the freedom and future of humanity. They're not just the latest invention. Someone just didn't come up and it didn't come out of someone's basement or someone's lab. These are specifically designed to keep us like focused on the screen and not really what's happening in the natural world. Because what's happening even today, so today there's some of the biggest solar activity on record for like a long time is going off. The sun is sending out these plasma waves and like geomagnetic storms that are almost unprecedented. And so that light that's coming to Earth it's evolutionary light. Light's not just random. It's not, actually is information, life optimizing information that activates DNA codes and expands consciousness. And it's essential for our well-being, physical, mental health,
Yeah,
but also for our evolution of our souls. So instead of focusing on the sun or nature or natural light, people are focusing on screens and missing out on receiving that light, that information, those evolutionary codes. And that's what I reckon is one of the main purposes of these devices, besides the brainwashing and mind control and all that. So
sure. Yeah.
I really recommend getting out, getting sunshine. I sun gaze every morning if possible and receive that. It's the highest information that we can receive while we're in human bodies. I mean, people can go out through the Akashic records or whatever, but just in terms of something that anyone can do, face the rising sun, receive sunlight for just a couple of seconds. And I don't know, I can't explain exactly how it works, but I do know that it works in terms of expanding consciousness and dissolving cognitive dissonance, and even helping to, like, I know this is from my personal experience, it's helped me break out of the suffering. I used to suffer all the time because I've lost a husband and a son, and just living with these gaping wounds inside that were excruciating. And so by doing practices like sun gazing, being out in nature, being grounded, the pain has lessened, so that now I don't suffer anymore. Not that I don't experience the pain or the rage or whatever, but I'm just it's helped me heal. So thoroughly recommend getting some sunlight in your eyes, on your skin. It helps the body make vitamin D, which is not necessarily a vitamin. Vitamin D is a precursor for about 200 hormones. So we really do need the sunlight on our skin and in our eyes. And there's lots of other reasons too, but really need to get outside, outdoors, and be in nature as much as possible. I'm sure from your practices, all this, but I think people need to be reminded.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's something that I often say on the channel and with others who are graciously enough to have me on as a guest. Like, very simply, just touch grass. Just go outside, touch grass. It's really all you have to do. Just connect with nature, touch grass, go barefoot when you can, if you can. I know that not everybody has those opportunities, especially if you're living in a larger city, for example, you really have to be careful on where you step, where you walk.
Touch trees as you go past a tree or a bush. You can do that. And people say, oh, there's snow on the ground. I can't. But touch trees, touch rocks, touch crystals, touch other grounded things like pets or another grounded person. That'll work. There are meditations, but it's this essential daily practice. We cannot expect to optimize our well-being, our physical, mental health, without being directly connected to the earth every day. It's just impossible. And it surprises me that even the functional medicine doctors don't really push this. You have to spend time connecting to the earth every day.
Yeah, it's more the ones who are for the who take the holistic approach, holistic herbal. I know of one who's really into that and who keeps pushing that message as well. She's really doing a great job. And like, speaking of being disconnected to nature and disconnected from everything, you have some, well, rather unfortunate firsthand experience with that. You briefly mentioned it already, living with your back then husband in an ashram, a supposedly spiritual community, and yeah, we've all heard the stories of like Jonestown, or the oh god, who was it again, who believed that they're
Manson.
yeah, or the guys whose like mothership was behind the Hale-Bopp comet or something.
That wasn't far from where this cult is. That was in San Diego. The Hale-Bopp comet people.
Yeah, it's always California. So often California for some reason. I don't know. Maybe just something in the water.
Something in the water. It's fascinating because the cult leader who I ended up marrying, I didn't know was a cult leader. Just spoiler alert. A lot of these things I found out many years down the track, but he was a trained actor. And so now he's just in another role as the Messiah, the savior of humanity, the Maitreya. So this is his other role. And there's another cult that had the cult leader had a very similar start as a failed actor, a short little Napoleonic complex guy with a narcissistic personality disorder who created a cult around himself. And there's a documentary, it's called Holy Hell. And it's actually made by the assistant of the cult leader. And that's probably the most similar cult to the one that I got involved in. But yeah, it's the same formula. The reasons behind why the cult leader does what he does. It's always about money, sex, and power and control. That always those, not necessarily in that order, but that's what they're after.
It's the age-old story: money, sex, and power is what everyone seems to be after, and what everyone always seems to be lacking, no matter how much of it they are getting or they are having.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about someone with a narcissistic personality disorder, is that they've just got a chasm inside themselves. It's unfillable. So they have an insatiable need for money, sex, and power. They have such a void of self-love that they'll spend every waking moment trying to fill that void. Very dangerous people, actually. These cult leaders, very dangerous. And it's not just about this. Another thing they came to understand, it's not just about their childhood wounds or what they didn't get from mummy or daddy or whatever. They have made pacts with demonic forces, and they are working for the dark forces. They're being used, and so we're up against black magicians, and without that knowledge, then it's hard to be protected.
Yeah, no, I have some experience with that as well. She wasn't a cult leader though, but definitely used sex for control and for for power, of course, through control. And now that she doesn't have any control, at least over me anymore, she is incredibly pissed off.
Right.
But so how did you end up with the with the man that you were with. I mean, sure that many, at least let's say outsiders who are, watching or listening this, I know that a lot of my viewers or listeners or first time listeners, from the outside, I'm looking in, it is always, well, more obvious, like, hey, there are some giant red flags. How are you missing those? But yeah, so how did you end up with him? And like, little side note, it doesn't surprise me at all that he was a trained actor. He was
Right.
very, very skilled at putting on a persona.
Yeah. Just another one of his roles. I just want to say one thing I just remembered about sun gazing. By taking in that light, that's one of the ways that we can protect ourselves from evil, from dark forces, from black magicians, by raising our own vibrational frequencies. That's why it's really important to, keep our energy high, because it's protection. So I just wanted to say that before I forgot, because it's really important now, because we are under attack. And so it's good to be as powerful as possible. And that's a very simple way to increase power and resilience. So how did I get into the cult? Well, I was perfectly set up by my family, which acted as my first cult. My mother was my first cult leader. She ran the family with the same dynamics as a cult. So she's the leader and she's the arbitrator of truth, and she's the one that says what people should do and shouldn't do. And if you don't fall in line with that, then you're punished by way of, from physical punishment to uh, silence to, being written out of the will, whatever it is. And having been raised by a narcissistic mother who was also a devout, like militant atheist, just hated God, taught us to believe that anyone who believed in God or went to church or whatever was like a subhuman, a lesser species, like almost retarded. So I had this superior attitude that I knew better than anyone who believed in God. And it took me till I was in my early 20s to actually break out of that like atheist mindset, to understand there's more to life than can be perceived through the five senses. So I was well set up by my family. I didn't love myself. I had no boundaries. I was a people pleaser. And it wasn't until I met who was my first husband. He was a lot older than me. Yeah, I had daddy issues and whatever. I can understand it, or now why it happened. But he was also one of the most wise people I've met. He did 4 tours of Vietnam, and I only found out like within the last 10 years. This is like he passed away 30 years ago. I only found out within the last 10 years that he was actually one of the longest serving Australian soldier in the Vietnam War. Like he never bragged about anything like that. And he'd had a spiritual awakening. So he shared books with me that he was reading, like Autobiography of a Yogi and The Little Prince and that. So that really opened my mind, and we did tantra courses together, and we did a lot of shamanic workshops. And so, we were meditating together and all that. And so it was very like mind-opening time with him. And we had a child together. And then I was 3 months pregnant with our second child. And we both worked in outdoor education, teaching climbing and skiing and all that. And he was using those activities with corporate groups to increase their communication and their team building. And he just started a new company, went off to work for the first day. And about 10 o'clock that morning, I got a knock on the door from the local cop and a neighbor. And I was told that he'd been found dead in his car. And in that moment, I knew that like my life, my dreams, having a family, mum and dad and the kids, that was just all gone in an instant.
Yeah.
And we were living on a farm because I wanted to be self-sufficient and all that. So I had to leave that because there's no way I could do that on my own with what was going to be 2 kids. And then I just went on this, it became almost like a gypsy. I didn't know, nowhere felt like home. I actually wanted to die. That was the truth of it all. And I did this shamanic course called Dying to Live, which was basically a darkness retreat. So we stayed blindfolded and in silence for most of the time, except when we were eating or when we were in the temple space. And in that time, we were writing our eulogy, writing the will, writing letters of forgiveness, all preparing for this death experience on the last morning. And I put my whole heart and soul in this because I thought like most of me doesn't want to be in this, in this body, and I've got children, so better, get my act together. And on that
Yeah.
Friday morning, I had a massive out-of-body experience. Like, I don't know where, how, whatever, but I went way, way out or in, or who knows. But then I met with my husband who'd passed and some other beings and was given some instructions. And one of them was to start training with this particular individual who later turns out to be the cult leader, whatever. So anyway, I got back from the course, contacted him, and he said come to be with him in his ashram. So I went with my children, and then we started living like as a family, supposed to be the divine family, in this house on a cul-de-sac in Laguna Hills in California. And he's still operating from that base, and started what I thought was my spiritual training. And that's not what was happening at all. It was
No.
actually a cult. And it wasn't until 8 years later, I had my son at that time was 15 and my daughter was 12, and we had sex one time, and I conceived a child, and he never touched me again after that for the whole marriage. He would give me all these excuses, like I was too needy, I was too much like a man, I'd been too rude and disrespectful, I didn't deserve his touch. And then it basically just became celibacy's, that's for your highest and best. That's for your ultimate spiritual growth, is to be celibate.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
meanwhile,
you're not
he's
being touched anyway, so like might as well make it part of your spiritual thing, because why not? Now at least you have a higher purpose for it.
yeah, right.
It's a
It
clever
was
way
torture.
of integrating it.
It's sexual abuse that's not really talked about, because it
Sorry,
is. No worries.
my phone is coming off. One moment, sorry about that. Baby, honey, I'm on the show. I told you I have a show at take my break. It's what is I'm sorry, love. I told you I have a show at 6:30. I'm just. Okay, I'll call you back when we're done. Okay. I'm gonna be off in 2 hours. Okay, sounds good. We'll All right, have fun. Yeah, I will. We'll plan something for later tonight. Love you too, baby. My babes. The wife with perfect timing as always. She's on her lunch break and was like, "Hey, I should call the hubby." And I was like, "Honey, told you, love you, babe. Timing. It's well, neither of us has timing as their strong suit." Anyway, where
We're just talking about what it was like in the cult.
Yeah,
And
celibacy being something
celibacy
that was
being supposed to be, that's my path.
yeah,
And it was, yeah, it was excruciating.
I can
It's
imagine. Yeah,
the type of it's sexual abuse that people don't really talk about. Yeah, it was torture, and I didn't find out till later on, but he was fucking the men in the cult, convincing them that they're gay, and that so they have this little tryst with Guruji, that, and they're special. And he had that going with a number of the men in the cult, like marriages broke up and all that. And then we find out that he's actually grooming the young boys in the cult, which leads me to what happened with my son. And he came home from school one day. He was really upset and didn't want to talk about it. So I said, "Oh, why don't you go to bed and we'll talk about it in the morning?" And in the morning, he was gone. I knew something was wrong because it was so far out of character, and we reported him missing. And the next day, the cult leader sent his assistant to look for him behind the house, and he was found with a knife wound to his neck and the kitchen knife next to him, and that was framed as a suicide. And that the reason he'd taken his life because he found out he was gay, and that was unacceptable to me. So, it was my fault. And that was just lies. This guy's like evil, pure evil. None of that was true. And it turns out that he had been grooming my son and allegedly had my son taken out so that he wouldn't be exposed as a pedophile, a rapist, and a con man. And that after my son was murdered, when if things were dark when my husband passed away, this was just, I really didn't want to live. I really didn't. I spent 6 months going like from breath to breath, really.
Yeah.
But once again, I had children, and I didn't feel like it was fair to them to have to deal with another death on top of their brothers. So I went to see this guy he'd been the cult counselor, because in addition to having our healing sessions with the guru, and we had to see a kinesiologist, there was also a psychologist, because we're all so messed up, in the cult. We're so damaged. How are we ever going to help the Maitreya save the world? So I went to see this guy, and when I walked in the door, I didn't see him actually while I was in the cult. Admittedly, I was quite a disobedient disciple, because there was so much hypocrisy and bullshit. I just didn't do what I was told. I'll fully own that. So I went to see this guy, and he said, "I knew you'd come to see me one day. You know you're in a cult, don't you?" And I said, "No, I don't know I'm in a cult. I thought I was in an ashram with my guru." And he said, "No, go home and Google cult characteristics," which I did. And sure enough, there's a checklist. A charismatic leader who's the arbitrator of truth. There's the love bombing is followed by
Mm.
hate. And so I went from the most beautiful woman in the world to the Antichrist pretty quickly, go like that. And then there's the gaslighting, which it's becoming a term that's most people understand now, but it came from a play back in the 90s where a husband tried to make his wife feel like she's going crazy by adjusting the brightness of the gas lights. This is before electricity, when they used gas for lighting. So he'd adjust the
Oh,
brightness, and she would say, "Did you know, did you see the lights went down?" He'd be like, "No, didn't notice anything." And she's like, "What?" Because gaslighting makes you question your own judgment
yeah. Yeah.
and question your own
I
sanity,
never
basically.
knew that that's where it was from, actually. I knew it had something to do with like actual gaslight. I never knew it was from a play. Funny how even actors are involved in that as well.
Right. And it's a movie too. I think it's like Olivia de Havilland or something, like a 1930s black and white movie. It's
Uh,
it's
yeah, of
it's
course. Yeah.
fascinating. But yeah, that's where gaslighting comes from, is that movie. And it does make, I lost my mind. I really did. It did make me go crazy. He would say stuff like, "Oh, we had this conversation," or "You said that." And of course, him being the guru, he's always right. No one can question him.
Yeah.
He knows me better than I know myself. So he basically made me go crazy from little details, like he would send me to the supermarket to shop, and he's so particular, like if you don't buy the fruit that's the right thing, then you have to, sometimes people have to eat it or take it back or buy the right fruit out of their own money. He would give brand names, and coming from Australia, a lot of them were foreign to me, so I would make a note, "I've got to get this type of toilet paper," and I'd come home and he said, "No, I didn't say that. I said, get this other brand." He said, I remember that being one of the first times he really fucked with my mind. That was in the first
Yeah.
couple of weeks. And that was years of him just fucking with my mind, everyone's mind, really. So there's the gaslighting, there's the psychological operations, psyops. We can see them; they happen on a big scale worldwide. But we had them in the cult too. He said that one of the disciples was enlightened, so we're all supposed to like revere her and whatever, and that creates a whole lot of jealousies and upset and all that. And then another one he had, this was the biggest one that he played on the cult, was that the baby that I was pregnant with, he announced was the embodiment of Lord Ganesha, who's it's from the Hindu pantheon, the god of the remover of obstacles. And Lord Ganesha had come to remove all the obstacles between me and God, so I could, I don't know, leave out some enlightenment fantasy or whatever. And so I was giving birth to this deity, which was bullshit. When she was born, she was deified. She was like, people would come and give her gifts, worship her and stuff like that. And then I had to put a stop to that. It was bullshit, but it was also causing a lot of problems in the family, because there's the other two children and what they're supposed to like revere their sister. It was such fuckery, that's for sure. So
Yeah.
anyway,
No.
once I went through the checklist of all the characteristics of a cult, I realized I was in a cult. And I know some people, experts even say you shouldn't tell people that they're in a cult because it'll just drive them further in. But if I hadn't been told I was in a cult, I don't know what would have snapped me out of it. I think I just would have taken myself out. So I think it's important to, if someone's in a cult, to let them know, but not just, there are ways to do that, like provide information. So it would have been good. My family had the resources to get a PI, a private investigator, and they could have
Mhm.
got photos. They could have got like forensic accountants to show that he's stealing money from his own private stash. And then also testimony from other ex-cult members who'd been raped by him or whatever, So there's evidence. It's not just, oh, you're in a cult, but here, yeah, you are in a cult. Here's the evidence. So once I knew I was in a cult, then I had to get out. And then he even doubled down more on me. He told me that I couldn't leave for start because I had a child, and by law, I'm not supposed to go within 2 hours, move within 2 hours of him, which I didn't even want to live in the States anymore. So
No,
that
I
was
can
that was a
imagine.
bind. And then also on the spiritual level, he told me it's been tens of thousands of lifetimes to get to him so we can live out our dharma or whatever. And if I turn my back on him, then I'm turning my back on my soul. I'm turning my back on God. And I've been very devoted to my spiritual path. That's my sole focus is to, follow what I feel like is my inner guidance. So that
Uh-huh.
meant that was a trap for me too, to think, well, I know I'm wounded. I can work. If I leave, I'm just going to be got the same issues. I'm taking them with me. But I knew I had to go. And I think in the end, he let me go because he knew he was going to have another dead body on his hands. So
Wow.
I left and I moved to Kauai, which is where I am now, and been here for 17 years, putting pieces together and getting to the place where I can write about it and speak about what happened in the cult. So that's how I got into the cult. I was like set up through this, but it's all came down to really lack of self-love. I because once I
Yeah.
understood that he had a narcissistic personality disorder, I had to, instead of pointing the finger at him, I had to say, well, what about me? What does that mean? Why I got into a relationship with him? And some people call it codependency. So both of those, narcissistic personality disorder and codependency, are what Dr. Sam Vaknin calls self-love deficit disorders, but they just manifest differently. So I'm looking outside myself, trying to get approval and
Yeah.
affection and all that, because I don't love myself. So I had to learn to love myself, and that's still a work in progress too. Spent a lot of years just saying the mantra, I love myself, treating myself like I would treat a child, making sure, that I ate what I wanted to eat and rested when I need to rest, spend time in nature, just being very gentle and nurturing with myself. And now I know he wasn't my last narcissist, just for the record. But
Oh, great.
yeah, on the third one, I'm like, oh my God, you've just got it. That's it. No more. I have to establish a baseline self-love, or this is going to be a lifetime of horror. So
I
I've,
mean, at least you recognize the pattern.
yeah,
I guess that's something.
yeah,
Wow, that is some story, and I definitely have a few questions. First and foremost, since I do work in security and I do deal with, the police and other authorities at times, especially at my last employer, I was working within the penitentiary, one of the penitentiaries close to here. About the end of your son's life, didn't the police do any investigation? I mean, and if they did, you would think that the signs, like kind of looking into, who this man is or is supposed to be and what all was happening, you would think that at the very least the authorities would pick up on some signs, but it sounds like they they wouldn't do any investigation or just believed him like, oh, it was suicide. Okay, well, case closed.
exactly. That's exactly what happened. He's the spin doctor. So he immediately got hold of the cops and got in their ears and told them what had happened. He said what had happened. And I was so fucked up that there was no way I could, like, demand an investigation or whatever. I just was unable to function, really. So he spun the whole thing. The cops didn't investigate. They didn't interview the last person who saw my son. They didn't interview, and she also saw him leave the house. So he had means, motive, and opportunity, and they never looked into any other version of events than my son took his life because he found out he was gay, which was just, like I said, evil lies. And it
Yeah.
wasn't, and later on when I went back to revisit it, because I realized how I found out that he was grooming my son, was there were two. So this cult has other cult homes in, like, in Australia, and I think even maybe in New Zealand still. Who knows? I haven't
Hmm.
been involved for a long time. Definitely in Melbourne. And there were two young boys who'd come in to live in the cult with their aunt, and they were groomed. They were groomed from pretty much immediately when they were in the cult. They were told that they were gay, and that if they just accept that they're gay, then all their lives will be easy. And they were sent, their aunt, who's the cult leader in Australia, she's pure evil. She sent them, those boys, into the bed of the pedophile cult leader. And then as adults, that those boys started to talk about what had happened to them. They spoke up. And so just put two and two together and realized that, that's what's going on under my roof, under my nose. So yeah,
That is,
sick stuff.
yeah, yeah, most definitely. And what also came to mind, and the story of it, starting with your own mother sounds familiar. That's how a well, now friend of mine ended up in a vampiric cult, actually, and he did well in that cult until he also saw things and heard about things that were to the extent of sexual violence and decided to step out. How much do you think that generational trauma is a factor in these things? I know that my family is definitely dealing with some generational trauma. I am seeing it in, well, all generations, really. I have seen it in my grandparents, my uncles and aunts. Definitely some of my cousins. I have taken a vow myself to, at least for, my well, let's say, branch of the bloodline, to break it, or break it as best I can. So just wondering what your thoughts are on that generational trauma. How much does it play a factor in these types of behaviors, in the well, let's say, also falling for it, if you will?
Yeah, it's a main factor. It's multi-generational trauma, and because people aren't dealing with their trauma, it just gets compacted and passed on and intensified. And like you, I committed myself to being at least in my lineage, to be a breaker of that those trauma patterns. And in my family, it was particularly between mothers and daughters. It's real, like, evil, competitive, toxic, just shit, really. And so I vowed to do that, but I failed. I failed. I don't have a relationship with my daughters. They've both decided they don't want me in their lives, and I know people will straight away will go, "Well, you're such a fucked up mother, no wonder." But I really put my heart and soul into parenting. Right from even before conception, calling in the soul. I did, like, lotus birth, no jabs, breastfed, child-led weaning, Waldorf schools. So I really put my heart and soul into it. Admittedly, I did, I've fucked up a few times, but I think that being able to forgive people it's a really important practice. And my mother she was the one who convinced my daughters to cut their relationship with me, not forgive me. And so that evil has passed through to my daughters from my mother. And that's one of the most heartbreaking things, because not having those relationships, just having them cut off, is, in some ways, it's even more painful than an actual death, because
Yeah.
they're choosing every day um to not have a relationship with me. And at this point, I'm good with that, because I really believe that if anyone who wanted to be in a relationship with me but was disrespectful or blaming or all that, it's better just to keep it like it is. It's really painful. And it's so heartbreaking to me, because I thought I was actually doing good. I was going to raise people, young people, into adults who were going to, be good people in the world and not be repeating cycles, and I failed.
I mean, being a parent is hard enough as it is. I am a father myself. I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son and a very, very strained relationship with their mother. But to be a mother who, or just be a parent while living in a cult under the thumb and the rule of a, well, really evil, despicable cult
Psychopath.
leader. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't blame you for just like having a really hard time and feeling as if you failed. I mean, you weren't really set up for success.
No, it certainly wasn't. Yeah, that was an interesting point that you brought up about, trying to be a parent in the cult. For a start, it's impossible to be a parent when you've got a parent who and you're not co-parenting. You're like, it's a battleground. So that was the case just as two people. But then we had the guru, who's he's the one who decides when the punishments get handed out and all that, and I'm just supposed to go along with it. And there were punishments all the time for, well, not just the children, but for any of the cult members who didn't do what they were told, or spoke in the wrong way, or didn't complete a task up to the standards. And that included, the main one that he gave out was writing lines of affirmation, like, I am obedient to my guru. And mine was, the one I had to write the most was, I am the wife of Christ. I had to write that 99 times, 3 times a day for 333 days or some bullshit. And my
I'm sorry,
son,
just the
I
numbers
know,
are, it's so typical.
no, it's okay. It's bullshit. And but
Yeah.
my son got the worst of it because he was the most defiant. The children could see through the facade, because the children they're much more pure in their outlook, so they could see through. And my son was particularly defiant, so he got the most punishments. Like, he was made to eat out of a dog bowl in front of people because he was rude at the table, and they were, of course, not grounded. And not that there was many cell phones in those days. It was kind of good that they didn't have cell phones. But yeah, the children were punished along with the other people. And then, of course, if I said anything, then I was punished. And mine was lines, or I was sent out of the bedroom and out of the house, and all sorts of demeaning tasks, punishments were handed out. So yeah, it was very difficult to be a parent. But I tried to keep up with the kids' activities. So from the outside, it looked normal. My son did taekwondo, and the girls did like dancing and horse riding and stuff like that. But it was just behind closed doors when it was hell. It was hell.
Yeah. I mean, that's well, not always, but so often the thing. You'll see people, living well, let's say the perfect suburban life on the outside, nice home, 2 kids, a dog, white picket fence, all that. But, as soon as the doors close and it's just the family, there are things happening that, well, aren't as perfect or as
Right.
happy go lucky, behind closed doors. It's become it,
Very toxic.
just those 3 words have, really have started to mean something in of themselves. It's become a thing in of itself. But
Yeah.
man, and he did all of that just because he could, or did he like at least pretend like it was out of love or some
Oh
spiritual
yeah. He's
gain?
he's full on in. This is the thing about the uh, people, or embodied demons like him. Like, do they know? Do they know what game they're playing, or do they fully believe? Does he fully believe that he really is the Maitreya? Does he fully believe he's the second coming? He probably had some expansive spiritual experience and heard, you're God or whatever. Like, we all know, but he took it personally and went, oh, okay, it's me. I'm the one. Or, is he in in the darkness of the night thinking, oh my God, can I keep this going? Because I've got to get up in the morning and start the whole scams all over again. Like, who did I lie to? Which Tinder date am I going to hook up with now? He's got to keep all those scamming. Yeah, he does that. Apparently he has these massage nights that are so active that the whole house shakes and stuff like that. So it's just gross, just absolutely gross.
Wow, that's a
Yeah,
good massage.
he has a sex addiction. He has a sex addiction, and his inner circle knows what he's up to. They know about him, but what he's done, this is like the ultimate of mindfucker. He's told his inner circle, most of them are women, that they're the most highly evolved beings on the earth. And so they're the ones that they can, like, what's the word? They can understand why he, as a divine being, the embodiment of divine love, why he can be out, chasing butt sex and just, living his best life as a sex addict. So they feel, right, that we're talking about spiritual narcissism.
Yeah, and that's spiritual psychosis, that's
Yeah.
spiritual narcissism. That is bad. I mean, there are and have been plenty of people who consider themselves to be spiritually more in line than others, especially like spiritual or religious psychosis. It's a thing. I'm putting together a presentation on that. I've got the basics, and I just need to refine it. It's a thing of all ages, but it is not often that it turns into cult leader status, and those are really the ones that you need to be wary of. And about that, was the third question I had. You mentioned the evidence, and that there could have been, should have been physical evidence. Now, I know from, well, also personal experience that when presented with the evidence, people still have a tendency to deny it, even if it's, well, literally happening right in front of their eyes, or there are pictures, documents, whatever, straight from the source. People will still deny it. So my question is, even during that time, if you were presented with the evidence that you were in a cult, and that your husband, whatever he was, husband in name only, I guess, was doing the things that he did, and was the reason why your son was killed, would you have believed it, or would you still denied?
That depends on the timing. If someone had presented me with that information within the first, honestly, like about 4 or 5 years, I would have denied it. I was batshit crazy. I've read over some of my writings, and I spent a lot of time like defending him to my mother, who was critical of him, obviously. Apparently, I didn't find this out 2 years later, but her and my dad, who were already divorced and never did anything together, went to see a cult expert. What the cult expert told them, but they never said anything. So, yeah, like I was saying about, like, it's important to know. But so if she told me that within the first 4 or 5 years, I still would have been defending him. But I was at the point after a while where I wanted out. I was desperate. I remember like clawing my wrist, just wishing I was out. And I feel like if that information had been presented when I was in that frame of mind, I would have been open. And even if it had been presented somewhere in the middle of that, that information would have at least, hope, maybe, like, just sparked something, got me asking questions. Like, why are you, going, what's this going to the gym thing? Like, why do you need to have an 8-hour massage session, at someone else's house? I could have, who knows what I would have done, but I'm thinking that it would have triggered something in me, had me asking questions, and it would have been confirming my doubts and suspicions by thinking, oh yeah, maybe this isn't what I'm being told it is. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. Definitely not at the start. I would have been, oh, you're full of shit. And then towards the end, it'll be like, oh, hang on, wait a minute. Perhaps there's some truth to this.
Yeah, I mean, at the very start of those things, it's probably also just not wanting to admit that those things are happening, because that would mean that everything that and have lived through and think and are experiencing is a lie, shattering your entire reality, which is if you're already in a bad place in your life, then having your reality shattered is not something that is really conducive to your mental health.
That's exactly why people won't let go of their existing beliefs about the world or whatever, because once you start to undo, unravel some of those beliefs, then what are you left with? Why did I give my 8 years of my life to this man, this situation? And now there's people in the cult who've been there for over 20 years. And what they're going to, at some point, that realization is, it's just almost too much. It's also, that's, and I see that on the bigger scale too, like with humanity in general, that people don't really want to question, oh, what's really going on with this reality? You know, what's up with the government and the bankers and the education system and medicine and all that? Are they really doing what we believe that they're doing, or is there something bigger? Is there something else? Is there something more? Once you start to unravel your beliefs that the government's here to serve people, that medicine's going to heal you, and we all need money to live, then where are you left? Because that's been someone's like baseline of existence. So
Yeah.
it's pretty scary, really, to start pulling apart belief systems, and that most people would rather accept the comfort of lies than the discomfort and sometimes the horror of truth.
Yeah. And you do indeed see that everywhere, from religion to
Yeah,
medicine to just the state of the planet, or state of well, society as a whole.
as a whole. And what I realized after I started the healing after leaving the cult was that what I had experienced in the cult, like the tactics that we use, the brainwashing and the mind control, the gaslighting and love bombing and all that, I could see then how that was operating on humanity. I could see that the brainwashing through the television and internet and mainstream media, and I could see that there was a cult operating like overall, and these systems like the government, the religions, banking, whatever, how they play, how they work together to keep people in this cult, in limited thinking, in brainwashed, mind controlled state. Where,
Yeah.
and we were talking about, with cognitive dissonance, can't see the truth, even if it's staring you straight in the face. So that was one of the hugest realizations I had when I got out of the cult. Was, I'm like, oh my God, we're all in my cult here. Cult programming going on everywhere. Cults aren't just religious groups or whatever. Cults function we talked about my family, whatever, but in political groups or sports teams or political parties, like I said that. But anyway, cults function in general. Like there's a general overall cult
Yeah.
programming going on.
And a lot of it in business too, like big businesses, etc. And that makes me like also kind of wonder, did you ever find out what happened to your first husband, the one who caused your spiritual awakening? Because like, just found dead in his car. I mean, that is highly suspicious. Uh,
No, it wasn't suspicious in that he had coronary atherosclerosis. His heart stopped.
oh,
Yeah, it wasn't,
okay.
he was running the Flying Fox. He was a ropes man. He was a rock climber, mountain climber and all that. So he was
Mm,
running this ropes course, and his partner couldn't find him, where he wasn't where he's supposed to be, and he went looking for him and found him in his car. His partner was a paramedic, and he tried to work on him, but he was long gone. And there was no indication of that. His doctor had said he'd had health checks and whatever, so it was completely out of the blue. Although
oh
because
wow.
he was in the SAS, so he's like a full-on like soldier, warrior mentality, so he wouldn't be the one to complain about pain and stuff like that. So who knows
Yeah,
whether he
no, of
actually had
course.
been experiencing pain. But he was only 53, which I remember when
Oh,
I
that's
turned 53, I thought, "Oh my God, this is so young."
it is young. Wow,
Yeah.
53.
And his
I
name
mean,
was
my
Barry Young too, so
of course.
but I can you were mentioning before, we were talking about how you can feel your crossed over loved ones. I can
Mhm.
feel him. I feel him. I talk to him all the time, you know. I have never stopped missing him since the day that he passed. And we were talking, you know, this is the thing about grief. It doesn't go. It just you just are able to live with it better, but it's always there, you know. Can easily tap into that loss, even if I can feel his presence and his direction. I still miss the shit out of him, and I, you know, was really looking forward to our life together.
I can imagine. I mean, the shock of losing a loved one, it is the greatest pain that you'll feel, whether it be your husband, whether it be, in my case, my brother, or, even worse for my parents, their son. I know that, all four of us, I do have a younger sister as well. She was actually the one who found him, um, talking about scarring. But, um, the four of us, we have, um, I don't want to say moved on, but life continues. But it's still, it's still a miss every
Yeah.
day. And his on his last birthday, little less than a month ago, 15th of October, we went to his grave, paid our respects, still told him how much we miss him, how much he is missed by everyone. So you learn to live with it, but
Yeah.
the the pain, the feeling of emptiness. It's an emptiness that is left in you that just can't be filled by anything else or anyone else. Really, it'll always be there. You just
Yeah.
learn to live with it.
And that whole idea of closure, that just infuriates me. It doesn't nothing's closed. You know, the wounds, the pain it's still open.
Yeah. Oh, I never even thought about it that way. But closure, situations like that, how can you ever really close it? Like, is it even
Yeah, right.
would it even be healthy to
Right. Don't even know
close
how to say
that?
that.
Wouldn't that mean denying a part of yourself, a part of your life that has happened, that has a major impact on you and shaped you into who you are today? So, and the closure and learning to live with it are two very different things. And
Yeah.
I do wonder, since you said that it was a higher being or higher beings and your husband who told you to walk the path that you ended up on. Do you think, or do you feel there was some meaning behind it? What was there a certain lesson that you needed to learn by going through it? Because it's been a hell of a hell of a path that you traveled, and I personally want to put anyone on that path, let alone someone that I love, whether it be me, my essence, that is doing that.
My best understanding is that I'm taking full responsibility for everything that's happened in my life. I'm not a victim. I have been a victim of someone else's, but personally, I'm not a victim. I'm a spiritual being. I'm here to grow and evolve, and everything that's happened in my life is because I wanted it, I chose it, I created it, all of it. And even though that what I chose to do in terms of following the guidance that I received when I had the out of body experience, which ended up with me getting into the cult, which ended up with my son being murdered, all of it. That is all for my evolution of my soul. And as much as I don't like the fact, it is that suffering it's like a crucible for wisdom. We learn through
Yeah.
pain. And that seems to be my journey. That's what I've chosen to do this time around. I reckon this is how I imagine it, though. So we're uh, about to come in to be incarnated, whatever, and get handed a like a checklist of what you want to experience this time around, what you need to learn and grow from. And I basically went to the bottom of the list where it says all of the above, like it's got death of a love, death of a partner, death of a child. And I've just gone to the bottom and gone all of the above, except I haven't really suffered physically. My body is so strong and resilient, and that's a real blessing, because this time around my lessons have come through emotional pain. So I'm fortunate that I don't experience a lot of physical pain, headaches sometimes, but otherwise I don't really get sick very often. But yeah, I chose some tough lessons this time around. And I'm sure that people could say that I'm, batshit crazy, which I have been, and, I have made some bad choices. I'm trusting my guidance, and the choices that I made were ones that I needed. I needed to go down that path, needed to experience whatever I needed to experience to get here, to get to this place, and to be able to like share what I've learned from my experiences. And that's what I write about. Is I write about all the natural medicines that we have available to us to help us through these, to help us be human, to help us through the tough times and the challenging times. So there are so many medicines out there in the natural world that we can use. We've already talked about grounding and sun gazing and spending time in nature and using crystals. There's also that we have the technologies in our body that we can use, from our voice, our breath, our movement, and these are all being forgotten and ignored and thought too simple to matter, but they really are important. And then there's all the spiritual technologies that we can use, like mantras and prayer and meditation. So that's what I've basically written. This is my book. This is so ridiculous. Into times where people are all stretched to read a tweet or a Twitter or whatever it is, I'm not even on them. I've written this book, New Human of New Earth, and it's got basically all the medicines that I've used to help me get through those experiences. And yeah, there's so much available to us to help us be human and be optimally human that are just being forgotten. And then here's this trippy, interesting thing. I watched a video called 35 Secret Teachings of Lemuria that will help you optimize your life or whatever. And of course, we talked about the whole secret thing, so I'm like, oh, I really want to listen to that. And as I was listening to it, I've heard about Lemuria. I know a lot of people think it's just a fantasy or a myth, and just lump it in there with Atlantis, like, oh, some nice made up story from the past. But once I was listening to this video, I realized that the same teachings that were being presented in the video was what I've written about in my book, about being connected to nature, about spending time in the natural world, about being devoted to spiritual evolution and working towards one's own healing and evolution, and also being concerned about the collective, and that we're all here helping, as Ramdas said, holding each other's hand, walking home together. Yeah, so I thought, oh my God, I've written all this information from a past civilization. Did I plagiarize it? And then I realized I've actually tapped into it. Like Lemuria was at some point a sort of physical, etherical place, but it's really a consciousness. And of course, living here on Kauai, which is a remnant of Lemuria, I've somehow tapped into that knowledge of the ancients that's now coming forward. This is, we are evolving into a new species, moving back, but also moving back to a past way of being, which is being pure, being connected to being connected to each other. So that was really exciting. I don't really like all this new age bullshit stuff, but to actually have that physical experience is, how could I know this knowledge without there being it being a real thing in the past? I actually have somehow brought forth this ancient knowledge, and it's from an actual civilization
timeline of humanity.
Totally.
And that just that also proves to me, at least once more, that there is such a thing as the Akashic records, or how Jung called it, the unconscious mind. Something that we can all tap
Tap
into,
into.
whether, consciously or subconsciously. I mean, like you said, you proved it. You've written down what is, well, at this point, ancient spiritual wisdom, and you didn't even know where it was from until you found out through a random, like, 30 facts about
Right.
video, which, yeah, no, that's amazing.
I often thought, where is this information coming from? Like, there's a shit ton of it. It took me 7 years to write the book, like, with the information I would type, clickety clack, clickety clack. And I thought, I wonder where this is coming from. And then to actually be able to make that connection. Like, if I'd known that while I was writing the book, I probably would have, learnt more about Lemuria. But it wasn't until afterwards that I got that confirmation. And then I started learning more about this past civilization. And it didn't disappear. It didn't like go beneath the waves, or maybe some of it did. But it was, like I said, it's a consciousness, an understanding, a level of perceiving reality that's available,
Yeah.
that's still here, never went.
Yeah. It's just the different dimensions, different levels
Yeah. I love
of consciousness.
consciousness. I love understanding and expanding and learning about consciousness. Whatever, e even though I couldn't really explain what it is, like maybe it's in the isness of being or presence, or I don't know, but I love expanding mine and then enjoying this sort of magic that happens when I'm focused on being fully present and like listening to my intuition and signs and synchronicities that are around me in the world. And it makes life fun and interesting when it's not horrible and heartbreaking. But yeah,
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, about the suffering part, that seems to be, well, a surefire way of reaching, well, either falling down the very abyss and never coming back up, or reaching the highest of heights. I've often said that, it's only in the darkest times when the light shines the brightest. And unfortunately, no, it's not fun to go through. I mean, there are two people here, like yourself and you and myself, like we can attest to it, that, having to go through everything that you went through, that I went through, it's not fun, but you gain a certain level of respect and understanding for the world and the things that are happening. And a lot of us indeed will step into that teacher role, which is so incredibly important. Like actual teachers, not like the ones that you that you have experienced, who just portrayed himself as I mean, it wasn't even really a teacher that he portrayed himself as. It was more just, I am he, worship me.
yeah, literally, like supposed to be putting flowers at his feet and kissing his picture and stuff like that. Absolutely
Oh.
batshit crazy stuff. He's still got his shingle hung up on the door. Still got the cult running, and that's the interesting thing about what I find about this cult is that it's only fairly small. There's probably less than 50 people in it at the moment. I think he's past his heyday, and there have been a lot of people who've left, and a lot of ex-cult members, probably about 50 of us or whatever, but hardly anyone is actually, the main one to speak. I'm the whistleblower, and there's another ex-cult member from Australia who's also speaking out about it, but people got so damaged by him, by the spiritual abuse, and particularly for the men who were mind raped and raped by him. They're so
Mhm.
damaged. They're not at a place to speak up about it. And also, he put a lot of fear into people. Like if you speak up, then bad things are going to happen. You're going to, your family is going to be sick or killed or whatever. That's what he told me. If you leave the cult, and the same thing that happened to your son's going to happen to, your daughter. So he
I
uses those
was,
threats to keep people silent. And so what I'm finding interesting is, even after all this time with all these cult members, people are so traumatized, they're just not ready or willing to speak out about it. And I get contacted sometimes by some ex-cult members, and then it never goes past, I understand, I hear you. And if you want to talk, I'm here. But no one really follows up with that. So that's the difference. Is he really fucked up a lot of people, a lot of families got broken up, lost homes. They'd sell their homes so they could go on the pilgrimage with him. Just the chain of suffering that he's created it's unfathomable. I would not want to have his karma. I would not want to experience the results of what he's put out into the world. Evil,
Yeah.
and he also taught me that evil is real. When I first started writing about evil, I didn't even like to use the word because I was also trained with the whole like anti-Bible thing, which I'm still not big on the Bible or whatever, but
Mhm.
I didn't even like using the word. I didn't want to believe that there was evil in the world, especially when, once you can see evil, then there's no end, and it's terrifying how evil people can be. But he showed me that evil is real, that demons are real, and that did need to protect myself.
Huh, I mean, yeah, he showed you his true colors. He showed what he
Yeah.
was all about, and the threats. I mean, you already said it. He's done it once before. Who's stopping him from doing it again, and he got away with it too.
Yeah, there have been a number of other suspicious deaths in the cult because he's not answerable to anyone. He's above all the laws, man's laws, natural law. He's above all those. And
No,
there's been 2 other suspicious deaths. One cult member took her life when she found out what he'd been up to. She she had suspicions. She also had a son. He preyed on single mothers. I was a single mother. There was another couple of single mothers in the cult.
easy targets.
Yeah, and that's really very common with pedophiles. They'll target single mothers so they can get access to the children, and that's what happened to me. And then when this cult member she'd been in the cult for a very long time actually, and she found out what he was up to, and she took her life. And he did the spin doctor thing on that too, blamed it all on her. And then there was another cult member who he during the whole scamdemic, the cult leader made it mandatory for everyone to participate in the injection experiment. And this one guy had a bad reaction. And then when the second round came, he was also told that he would be kicked out of the cult if he didn't take the shot. And he did, and he died. Turbo cancer, and then died. So he's got blood on his
Oh,
hands, the cult leader. Very dangerous persuader.
yeah. I'm thinking in the description box down below, I have to like put a link to just some website or somewhere with the main characteristics of a cult leader, of being in a cult, because those people are dangerous and more prevalent than you may think. As we
I
mentioned,
agree.
they are everywhere,
Yeah, they are everywhere.
and that's why I like to like you mentioned, religion and growing up atheist, or being forced to grow up atheist. Really, that's why I always like to make the distinction between religion and dogma, because dogma, or just the church, most often is very cult like as well. You do as the reverend says, you do as the pastor says, because he is the messenger for God. He acts on behalf of God or whoever. So whatever he says goes. And we've seen with the Catholic Church how that ends, speaking of grooming and pedophilia. And religion is, in my mind at least, is very separate from that. Because if you look at the Bible, if you look at Christianity at their teachings, I'm not a Christian myself. Obviously, it's my shows, the Greyhorn Pagans podcast, but I have come to a greater understanding of religion and religions of our planet. There are good teachings. Christ, assuming he was a physical figure of some kind, at least, he was a magi. The Bible is full of, occult and esoteric knowledge, full of metaphysics, full of astronomy, astrology,
Right.
alchemy. So there is a lot of magic in religion, but you have to make the separation between what is religion and what is dogma. The one tells you, like dogma tells you, this is what it's like, this is what you need to do to, gain this. It's the way, no other way. All other ways are either invalid or will be punished. Sounds very culty to me. Religion is like, Here are some things that, may help you. This is what it can be, but you're going to have to find out for yourself. You're going to have to do the work, you're going to have to do the inner works, inner alchemy, because nothing's for free, unfortunately, and not even enlightenment, knowledge, or wisdom.
I reckon even interactions with one other person or in a group or in a community or even bigger than that, any situation where we're being told what to do, where there's like any power being exerted over us, or any way that our intuition or our connection to God is being usurped or invalidated, that's when the cult dynamic takes effect.
Yeah.
Because in the cult, of course, it's the top-down power structure, which is what we see in the world around us, which has no moral legitimacy, like nothing, no one has power over us. We are sovereign beings. So to have any type of rules, laws outside of natural law put on top of us is culty.
Yeah. I mean, I do believe in, strong leaders who, do have the best intent
Right.
for their people, for
Exactly.
mankind.
Yeah.
But we should be able to criticize those
Yeah.
leaders. We should be able to call them out if we feel that, they are,
Not acting in our best interests.
yeah, exactly. I've been in a few communities like that, and because I got so sick and tired of it, I started my own. I started my own tribe, and yeah, I mean, I have made mistakes within my own tribe. I have unfortunately lost a few good members, few good people because of it. But I will own up to it. If I have to do some soul searching first. Have to really open my eyes to be able to see what went wrong. But when I do, I will admit it. And, I just hope that by doing these kinds of interviews that people will understand or start to understand that this world is not just our physical world, and that our way of living is not the way that it should be. It's not to our benefit. It's to the benefit of a small percentage, not even a 1%, like 1% of the 1%.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been, it's a brutal story, really, but may it serve as a warning to others to keep their eyes open and try not to fall for
Right.
the same
Yeah.
tricks.
Well, thank you for your giving me this opportunity to share what I've learned from my experiences. Thank you for your interest and your questions and your engagement. I really appreciated this conversation. I did want to learn more about you and what it means to be pagan. That's not something I really understand, but anyway, I can do my own.
We can do a separate conversation on that. I
Yeah.
love talking about my path, my gods, my people. I've done it too many times. Well, not often enough. Too many times, but still not often enough. So we can definitely do just a separate conversation for
Yeah,
that.
that'd be good. Yes, and thank you for your time today, and thank you for all the work you're doing to put on the podcast and then produce the episodes. I really appreciate that. It takes a lot of work. And thank you for your contribution to the freedom and future of humanity, to be giving a platform for people to share information that can help others. I think it's really important at this time. There are so many people who are suffering. Really, I've got two people who are in hospital at the moment that I've never had that happen before, two close friends. And I'm sure that you also speak to a lot of people who are going through physical challenges, mental health challenges, financial challenges, whatever. It's becoming ubiquitous for people to be suffering. And this is a paradigm shift. This is a paradigm shift. So one could expect it to be a rough ride. Maintaining a strong connection to nature, and particularly the earth, physically connected to the earth, is going to help us through this time, because as the changes are happening to earth, vibrational changes. If we're connected to earth, then we change along with it rather than being disconnected and going through all sorts of like physical symptoms and mental health challenges and stuff like that. So that's my takeaway from today is just spend as much time in nature as possible, and and that alone can be a start towards alleviating the suffering.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for more on you and what you do, such as your book, which is it's a hefty one.
It's a doorstopper.
Yeah, for sure. But where may the good people find you? Where may they find more of your
I
work?
have a website. It's feelingbetter.naturally.love, and a YouTube channel called Feeling Better Naturally, and a Substack, Feeling Better Naturally. And my book, New Human of New Earth, is available on Amazon.
Awesome. I will make sure to put the links up in the description box down below. Of course, I always want to make sure that my guests are well represented, because
Thank
I
you.
wouldn't have learned half the things that I know or half the lessons that I have if it wasn't for amazing guests such as yourself.
Thank you.
Podcasting is awesome, but it's I wouldn't have a podcast if it wasn't for my guests. I always want to express my gratitude for that. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope you are not too scarred by this conversation and that you have at least taken some lessons from it. And if you are scarred, sorry, I guess. For more on the Greyhorn Pagans, Trial of the Greyhorn Pagans, go to our website, www.greyhornpagans.com. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. And for a little more support, do consider subscribing to our Patreon at patreon.com/GreyhornPagans, where we have, of course, our esoteric book club. We early access to all the podcasts, unedited, of course, all the raw stuff you're getting, and much more, of course, or become a channel member on YouTube, now that YouTube has finally allowed me to sort of monetize my channel. Channel membership would be the best option. Either way, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. I will catch you all next time. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
This was yet another amazing episode of the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. We thank you all for watching. We thank you all for listening. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you will be notified whenever we upload something new. Support us on Patreon for early access and for everything else that we do with the tribe, for everything else that we do with the podcast. Find us on www.greyhornpagans.com. For now, we thank you, and until next time.